a quiet act of love, or the spark that sets everything in motion. When a young girl, Emily Grace Walker, stood frozen before an empty display shelf, her trembling hands clutching a handful of crumpled dollar bills, she wasn't trying to change the world. She just wanted to make her mother smile. But when the gift she'd saved for over weeks was already sold before she arrived, and hope began to fade, someone unexpected walked through the door. What she didn't know? He wasn't just a stranger. He was Sylvester Stallone. And in the next few minutes, what began as a rainy afternoon in Missoula would become the beginning of something far greater. This is a story about resilience, forgotten dreams, and the kind of kindness that doesn't announce itself. It simply shows up and stays. Keep watching, because where this story goes, you'll feel it long after the video fades out. Drop us a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We see every single one. Her mother's birthday was tomorrow. Not just any birthday, it was her 45th. This year, Emily wanted to give her something truly meaningful. A gift that could last. A gift that might remind her mother that brighter days were still possible. She had set her heart on a sewing machine, but it was gone. Where it used to sit, there was now only an empty space. A small handwritten tag taped to the shelf read, "Sold, awaiting pickup." Her heart sank. Behind the counter, a thin man with graying hair and a name tag that read Cal looked up from the register. His voice carried a note of apology. "Sorry, sweetheart. Someone called in this morning and paid for it over the phone. Said they'd be by later to pick it up." Emily blinked hard, forcing herself to hold her chin up. The envelope in her hand suddenly felt heavier, not with hope, but with disappointment. She mumbled a quiet, "Okay," and turned to leave. Then a voice rang out through the store. Low, gravelly, familiar in a way that made time slow down. "Hey, you okay, kid?" She looked up. Standing near the entrance, water dripping from the shoulders of his black coat, was a tall, broad man with strong, weathered features and tired eyes. His gray beanie clung to damp curls. His voice, though soft, carried weight like granite beneath velvet. Emily's breath caught. She knew that voice. He stepped forward, brows knit with quiet concern. "You look like someone just kicked your puppy." Emily hesitated. "It's nothing," she said softly. "I came to buy something, but it's already gone." He tilted his head slightly, eyes studying her face. "A birthday gift?" "For my mom," she nodded. "It was a sewing machine. She used to love sewing, but I guess it's stupid now." "Doesn't sound stupid to me." He crouched down slightly, his coat wrinkling at the shoulders. "What's your name?" "Emily." He smiled gently. "Emily. That's a good name." "I'm Sly." A pause. "Sylvester Stallone?" Her eyes widened. "Like Rocky?" "The one and only," he chuckled. She blinked, stunned. "Oh my gosh." "My mom watches Rocky II every New Year's. She says the fight scenes are better than therapy. That made him laugh out loud. She's not wrong." Cal, behind the counter, leaned forward slightly, clearly starstruck, but remained silent. Stallone stood up and turned to Cal. "You said the machine sold?" Cal nodded. "Yeah, someone called in around 9. Paid in full." "You got another one in the back?" Cal shook his head. "I wish. That was the last one. Shipment's delayed." "Weather's been rough." Sylvester Stallone turned back to Emily, thoughtful. "All right, let's take a look around. Maybe we can find something even better." Emily stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" He shrugged. "Because I've had days where one small thing meant everything. And because it's your mom's birthday. That matters." She hesitated, then slowly followed him down the aisle. They walked past the crafts section, where embroidery hoops and quilting thread gathered dust on the shelves. She paused near a rotary cutter and a pair of high-quality sewing scissors. Sly picked up a wooden sewing caddy compartments, spools, everything carefully arranged. "Does your mom have fabric at home?" he asked. "She saves scraps," Emily said. "Old pillowcases, shirts that don't fit me anymore. She says every thread tells a story." "That's beautiful," he murmured, gently setting the caddy down. "Sounds like she builds more than just clothes." "She builds hope?" Emily mumbled. Then, a bit embarrassed, she added, she tries. She's tired. Strong people usually are." They moved on. He picked up a hand-powered stitcher, then a vintage-style thimble set. Emily ran her fingers across a quilting ruler, then spotted a small beginner's sewing kit in a metal tin thread, chalk pencils, fabric markers, and a tomato-shaped pin cushion. Sly added it up mentally. "Comes to about $90. Emily slowly opened the envelope, her fingers trembling as she peeled back the flap. "I have 41, and some change." He waved it off. "Put it away. This one's on me." Her eyes went wide. "I can't let you." "Sure you can. You just did." At the counter, he handed Cal a crisp $100 bill. "Wrap it up nicely," he said, "and give the girl whatever's left in change." Cal stared, then nodded. "Of course." As the cashier boxed everything up with care, Stallone turned back to Emily. "So tell me about her. Your mom." Emily's voice was steadier now. "Her name's Rachel. She used to make dresses. She said it was the only time she felt truly creative. Now she works at Lindy's Diner, but she still makes time for me. Even if it's just a cup of tea and a few pages from Little Women." Stallone nodded slowly, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "Sounds like the real kind of tough." "She is," Emily whispered. When the gift was wrapped and ready, Stallone picked it up and handed it to her. "Tell her it's from you, and from someone who thinks she's doing an incredible job." Emily nodded, biting her lip to keep her emotions in check. "You live far?" "Couple miles," she said. "Need a ride?" She looked out the window at the steady, cold drizzle. "Would that be okay?" He smiled. "Come on, let's get this gift home safe." They stepped outside into the drizzling rain, Emily gripping the bag like it contained a secret too delicate for words. Stallone led her to a charcoal gray pickup truck parked under a flickering street lamp, the kind that had seen its share of miles, but looked cared for. The engine rumbled to life with a low, steady growl. Inside, the heater hissed warm air as Emily climbed in, adjusting her damp mittens. Sly pulled out of the parking lot slowly, glancing at her with curiosity, not pressure. "So, where are we headed?" She gave directions through a soft voice, pointing to a modest neighborhood near the edge of town Woodbridge Terrace, a place with cracked sidewalks, narrow driveways, and homes wearing coats of age and resilience. Her house was pale green with chipped paint along the windowsills, a tiny front porch sagging under the weight of old furniture and wind chimes. "You okay if I walk you in?" Stallone asked as he parked at the curb. Emily nodded. "Yeah, my mom's probably home from her shift. She gets off around 3. They stepped onto the porch together, the wind brushing against their jackets. Emily hesitated at the door, took a breath, and pushed it open. "Mom," she called out, "I'm home, and someone's with me." Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and dish soap. The living room was small and neat, lit by a warm lamp beside the couch. From the kitchen came the soft clang of a spoon in a teacup. Rachel appeared in the doorway, wearing an oversized sweatshirt with flathead high school choir faded across the chest, her dark hair pulled up in a loose bun. Her face, tired but kind, broke into visible confusion when she saw the man standing behind her daughter. Her voice wavered. "Is that, oh my God, are you?" "Sylvester Stallone," he said gently, smiling. "Just passing through." Emily stepped forward, holding out the wrap bag with both hands. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said. "I wanted to get you the sewing machine, but someone bought it first. So I found this instead. I hope it's okay." Rachel's hands trembled as she took the package. She glanced at Stallone, then back at Emily, her eyes filling. She opened the box slowly, uncovering the sewing kit, the shears, the thread, the measuring tape, all perfectly chosen, not just with money, but with love. She touched the thimble, then the chalk pencil, then the tomato-shaped pin cushion, like it was too much to believe. "Emily," she breathed, "this is beautiful." Then she looked up. "How did you—" Emily gestured toward Sly. "He helped me. He was at the store." Rachel stared at him in stunned silence. "Why would you—" He shifted slightly, resting a hand on the back of the couch. "Because your kids got more grit than most adults I've met in this world, and because she's trying to lift you up. That's worth backing." Rachel blinked hard. "You don't even know us." "Don't need to," he replied softly. "Kindness isn't a contract." For a moment, nobody said anything. The hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. Then Stallone glanced at the kitchen. "Mind if I sit a minute? Been on the road a while." "Of course," Rachel said, stepping aside. "Can I get you tea?" "Coffee?" "Tea sounds perfect." She moved to the kitchen, and Emily led him to the worn couch. He sat down carefully, like he'd done it 1,000 times, stretching slightly as he looked around. The living room was small but cozy, with family photos lining the mantel and a bookshelf brimming with cookbooks and old VHS tapes. A framed photo of a younger Rachel sewing at a craft fair caught his eye. "She used to sell quilts?" he asked. Emily nodded, sliding into the armchair. "She had a little booth every summer at the farmer's market. People called her the Quilt Whisperer." Sly smiled at that. "You should tell her to put that on a business card." Rachel returned with a tray, 2 chipped mugs of mint tea, and a small plate of sugar cookies. She sat on the edge of the armrest near Emily, eyes still scanning Stallone's face as if he might disappear if she blinked too long. He took a sip, then leaned forward slightly. "Your daughter mentioned you used to sew a lot, that you loved it." Rachel smiled, though it faltered at the edges. "I did. I do. But it's hard now. Long hours, little money. The old machine died, and after that, I figured maybe it was time to stop pretending." "Pretending? That it could be more than a hobby? That it could be something bigger?" Stallone nodded thoughtfully. "What if it didn't have to be a hobby?" Rachel frowned. "I don't follow." He set down his cup, his voice calm but certain. "I know some folks, small project producers, documentary types. They look for real stories, stories like yours. What you're doing, raising a kid, keeping a home together, trying to hold on to creativity, that's the stuff that matters." She stared. "You're saying, they'd film me?" "You," he said. "Your story, your dream. And with it, help, funding, tools, exposure. Maybe even enough to open a small workshop." Emily gasped. "Like a real sewing room? Maybe even a storefront," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Right here in Missoula, if you're willing." Rachel's hands covered her mouth. I can't imagine that. Why would you go to all this trouble? Stallone looked at her seriously. Because I know what it feels like to be on the edge of giving up. And I know how far a little belief can go. Sometimes people just need to be reminded that they matter. Rachel looked at her daughter, who nodded, her eyes wide with hope. You could do it, Mom. I know you could. I'm scared, Rachel admitted. I don't know if I'm strong enough to start over. You're already strong, Stallone said. You're here. You're raising her. You haven't quit. That's what strength looks like. A soft knock came at the door. Emily jumped up and answered it. A man in a blue jacket, holding a clipboard and wearing a camera bag, stood under the porch light. Sorry to interrupt. James Morrison. Sly called me earlier. Mind if we chat for a minute? Rachel looked between Stallone and the man, then slowly nodded. Okay. James stepped inside and shook her hand. We'd like to document your journey, nothing invasive. Just your day-to-day life, your sewing, the rebirth of a dream. We've got a small budget from a non-profit looking to highlight American resilience people building something out of nothing. And you, he smiled, you're kind of perfect for that. Rachel's eyes welled up again. She leaned back, her voice shaky. This doesn't feel real. It's real, Stallone said, if you want it. She looked at Emily, who had never looked prouder. Slowly, Rachel whispered, Yes. All right, James said. We'll set up this week. You just keep being you. As the night wore on, Stallone stayed. They drank more tea, laughed about the time Emily tried to sew a pillow and accidentally stitched it closed with the stuffing outside. He helped Emily carry a box of old fabric from the attic, and even fixed a loose leg on the couch using a screwdriver he had in the truck. When he finally stood to leave, Rachel walked him to the door. Thank you, she said quietly. Not just for today, for believing in us. He touched the brim of his cap. Sometimes all we need is someone to remind us it's okay to dream again. As the truck rumbled off down the darkened street, Rachel and Emily stood in the doorway, arms around each other. The storm had passed. The street glistened in the lamplight. And somewhere in the quiet hum of that December night, a dream had been pulled from the shelf, dusted off, and brought home wrapped in hope, stitched with belief. The next morning, Rachel awoke earlier than usual, her body still adjusting to the reality that had unfolded the night before. The sewing kit Emily had given her sat neatly on the corner of the dining table, sunlight catching the polished metal edges of the scissors and the glint of colorful thread spools. It wasn't just a gift. It was a sign, a nudge from life, reminding her that the part of herself she'd buried under bills and exhaustion was still very much alive. Emily bounded into the room in her pajama pants and socks, holding 2 mugs of cocoa, one slightly overfilled and dripping down the side. I thought you might want one. Rachel took it with a smile, then pulled her daughter into a tight hug. You changed everything, she whispered. No, Emily replied. He just helped. You were always the one holding us together. That afternoon, James returned with 2 crew members and a few cameras no bigger than Rachel's old VHS camcorder. They didn't demand anything staged or artificial. Instead, they simply watched, filming Rachel as she opened her box of fabric scraps, ran her hands over old patchwork pieces from baby clothes, curtain trimmings, and hand-me-downs. They filmed her sketching designs at the kitchen table, a pencil tucked behind her ear, and captured Emily doing homework just across from her, stealing glances at her mom's quick, sure hands. Within a week, volunteers began arriving, people from town who'd heard whispers about the project, some out of curiosity, others out of admiration. An old friend from church dropped off an unused sewing table. A man named Tom, who ran the hardware store 2 blocks over, offered reclaimed wood to help convert their garage into a tiny workshop. Stallone showed up again the following Saturday, just as Rachel was finishing the first batch of cloth face masks she planned to donate to the local clinic. He didn't come with a camera crew or a fancy speech. He just leaned against the garage frame and said, "How's it feel?" Rachel looked up, sweat on her brow, needle between her fingers. "Like waking up in my own skin again." He grinned. "That's the kind of answer that belongs in a movie." She laughed and offered him a folding chair, which he accepted gladly. Emily came running out with lemonade in mismatched glasses. "They're making a website now," she told him, "so she can take orders." Sly raised his eyebrows. "Orders already?" "I got 6 last night," Rachel added. "Baby quilts, custom aprons. One lady wants a memory blanket made out of her husband's old flannel shirts." He nodded, impressed. People connect with what's real. They don't just want perfect stitches. They want a story they can feel. Over the next few weeks, the garage transformed. The volunteers helped insulate the walls, paint them a soft cream, and install shelving. James captured everything: the sweat, the laughter, the mistakes. He included quiet moments, too. Rachel, late at night, pinning fabric under the hum of a single lamp. Emily taping cardboard signs with her mom's logo, Patch and Purpose, written in curling script. On a chilly Thursday morning in February, the crew wrapped filming. They edited quickly, fueled by the heart behind the footage. By the first week of March, the short documentary premiered at the Missoula Community Center. Word had spread far beyond Montana. By then, local papers had picked up the story, and so had a few national blogs. The room was packed. Families with kids, elderly couples who remembered when the Walkers moved in, former classmates of Rachel's who hadn't seen her in years, all squeezed into folding chairs with steaming styrofoam cups of cider and popcorn. The screen flickered to life, and the film began. There was Rachel, awkward at first on camera, then slowly more natural. There was Emily, beaming as she described her mom's pancakes and how she sometimes cried when nobody could see. There was Stallone, his voice gravelly and sincere, saying things like, "Real strength doesn't make noise. It just keeps going." When the final frame faded, the room stayed quiet for a moment too long. Then the applause came, soft at first, then growing into a standing ovation. Rachel sat motionless, one hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emily reached over and squeezed her hand. "They see you now, Mom," she said. "They see what I've always seen." That same evening, an email came through the website. Then another, and another. Orders, encouragement, wholesale interest. A retired school teacher from Colorado wanted 30 custom tote bags for her book club. A boutique in Oregon wanted to feature Rachel's aprons. Even a letter from a craft collective in Brooklyn appeared, offering a micro grant and mentorship. By mid-spring, Rachel had to hire help. She brought in Maria Sanchez, a former colleague from Lindy's Diner, who'd always dreamed of doing something creative. Then Dottie, an elderly neighbor with a bad hip, but a gift for embroidery. The little sewing business, once a wild idea whispered in a rainstorm, had become a pillar of the neighborhood. Stallone dropped by now and then, always quietly, always with his sleeves rolled up. Sometimes he brought coffee. Once he brought a vintage Singer machine someone had gifted him years ago. She deserves a second chance, he said, patting the wooden case. He never asked for credit. He never tried to stand in the spotlight. He just showed up, lent a hand, and when people thanked him, he shrugged and said, "Just doing my part." In the fall, the Missoula City Council named October 14th Patch and Purpose Day, celebrating local resilience and community kindness. Rachel gave a short speech from the steps of the community hall, Emily holding her hand the whole time. Stallone stood off to the side, arms folded, a proud smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That night, as the crowd dispersed and the town returned to its slow hum, Rachel stood alone for a moment under the stars. Emily came up beside her, the crisp air carrying the scent of pine and cooling pavement. "You tired?" Rachel asked. Emily shook her head. "Number just thinking." "About what?" "About how it all started. You know, the mixer we didn't get." Rachel laughed. "The one we didn't need after all." Emily nodded. "I think maybe we got something better." Her mom turned, brushing a loose strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "We got each other," she whispered. "That's always been the best part." Nearby, from the shadow of the building, Stallone leaned against a post, watching them with quiet satisfaction. He didn't interrupt, didn't wave goodbye, just tipped his head and walked slowly toward his truck, disappearing into the night like a chapter closing gently. Back at home, Rachel placed the first pair of scissors Emily had bought her back into their case, next to the pin cushion and the floral measuring tape. She ran her hand over the lid, tracing the edge like a seamstress finishing a final stitch. "We built this," she murmured, "with thread and tears and maybe a little bit of stardust." Emily leaned against her, eyes sleepy but content. "And we're not done yet." No, they weren't, because dreams don't die. They just wait for the right hands to bring them back to life. And sometimes all it takes is a little help, and someone who believes you still have something beautiful to give.